Backchat TV. Subscribe.
He has also talked about it. That left hook is so good, and it's so long and so precise and so hard.
What's going on, guys? It's Backchat TV. Today we're going to talk about this mess. Ryan Garcia, his whole promotional team, not seeing eye to eye with Oscar De La Hoya, Bernard Hopkins. What's it all about? Why is it that they cannot see eye to eye and there's so much animosity between them? I'm not going to speak long about it. I'm going to try and be as quick as possible just to see where it started and why it got to, what we saw in the press conference, which was just ridiculous. It was quite funny, but, very embarrassing. They'd lost to Gervonta Davis. What has it done to his legacy? Can he come back from this? Can he still compete with the likes of Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo, and these up-and-coming guys who are, champions around his age? A lot of the guys that he actually sparred coming up with, like Devin Haney, they actually sparred many times and sparred when they were very young. And Devin Haney kind of has taken off, and Garcia not quite accomplished the things that, like I said, Gervonta Davis and Devin Haney has, but he's right behind them. And in the way of kind of like popularity, he's right up there. So does he still have a chance to become like the face of boxing? So first of all, I'm just going to speak about where I think this whole beef began. So it started first of all with Oscar De La Hoya and Bernard Hopkins being quite close to Garcia. Garcia being quite excited to work with Golden Boy Promotions, and Garcia really had a lot of faith in his promotional team. He thought that they had his best interest, and I personally feel like they had his best interest. Call me naive, but I don't think they just saw him as a cash cow, or they didn't really like him. They wanted him to get beaten, or they didn't believe in him, or any of these things that Garcia has been talking about. I honestly feel that Oscar De La Hoya in the early days saw Garcia as a real prospect and wanted to protect him, and hence we come to the first stumbling block, which was the Gervonta Davis fight. Garcia was overly eager to fight Gervonta Davis. He just had this thought that he could beat him. He probably thought that he was just too small, too short to pose any real threat to Ryan Garcia, being the taller man with a massive reach advantage, heavier naturally. He probably didn't see Gervonta Davis as having any advantages over him. He really believed he was going to beat Gervonta Davis. So he was pushing Oscar to make the fight, whereas Oscar De La Hoya, more experienced, actually quite a big fan of Gervonta, saw the talent in him straight away and was like, no, I don't want to get that fight for you so far. You've already got a big name just on the social media side, a lot of female fans. He can really become the face of boxing, and he wanted to kind of move Garcia slowly, avoiding the difficult fights, just building up his name, fighting a few people, getting some good wins, getting more publicity. That's his job, and that's what he really wanted to do. Not like getting the easy fights, but just get fights that he knew he would win, build up his name, build up his skill set as well, more experience before fighting Gervonta Davis. That's what he wanted. He saw the talent in Gervonta Davis. He saw that he was a potential banana skin early on, and he wanted Garcia, who hadn't had as many fights, to kind of build up his name and profile. That's what from all the interviews I've seen, that is what Oscar De La Hoya really wanted for Garcia. Now, there could be a bit of selfishness in that as well. The more money Garcia gets and more publicity, the more money he gets when he makes a fight, because you get more eyes, more views, more pay-per-views. Any fight he's in becomes a pay-per-view, even if the opponent isn't anything special. And obviously the money is also a driving factor, but I do think that his promotional team, they did want his success. I don't think they had any reason to want to see him get beaten at this point. Garcia took it personal when Oscar De La Hoya kept trying to avoid the fight with Gervonta Davis. And then he took that as being kind of Oscar De La Hoya not really believing in his skills, saying to him one thing, that he's the face of boxing and he's one of the best fighters, he's got amazing skills, and then later on, you know, behind his back saying, oh, there's no way that he would beat Gervonta Davis, which he was caught saying to a fan, and he was caught and people put it on social media. And so that was the first riff, him stabbing him in the back, because Oscar De La Hoya in every interview early on was saying that Ryan Garcia is the face of boxing, he's going to beat everyone, no one else comes close to him when it comes to talent, and then behind his back saying something else. So this was the main thing. He got upset about that, he didn't like it, he didn't like the fact that he didn't believe in him, and then he had this whole breakdown thing with the time out of the ring and the mental health issues, and that was a bit of a strain. That was the first strain on their relationship. Now from that moment, I think Oscar De La Hoya was a bit upset with how he was being treated by Garcia being a bit emotional, and I think he kind of didn't like that. That was the first riff. Nevertheless, he forced him to make the Gervonta Davis fight. Later on, Oscar De La Hoya said that it wasn't that he didn't think he could beat him, but they wanted too many things in the contract that were in their favour, and he didn't think that they should do all those things. But Garcia was just pushing him to make the fight, thinking with his emotions, whereas Oscar De La Hoya was thinking with his experience, and you know, he had to do what Garcia said, and I don't think Oscar De La Hoya liked that. When the fight was made, obviously we know what happened. Garcia lost. He never saw that coming. Now when he lost, I think Oscar De La Hoya and Bernard Hopkins were annoyed because they were telling him all this time it could have been avoided, and you know, he took an early loss, and it affects his whole profile, and this is what Oscar De La Hoya didn't want. So he was a bit annoyed about that. Maybe that's the reason why they didn't come to the press conference afterwards. They made up this elaborate excuse, whether it was real or not, and why none of them could be there. I don't know what that whole thing was about. It didn't seem very genuine. I don't think Garcia bought that excuse for why they couldn't be at the post conference, but Garcia was just sitting there on his own with Gervonta Davis speaking, and Gervonta Davis' whole team was there and no one was there for Garcia. That was another thing that Garcia was upset about, so that was another thing for him to complain about, that they don't believe in him and they didn't do the right thing. Also, he was kind of against his trainer, Goosen, because in camp everything should have been private and well protected, and he didn't feel protected because Gervonta Davis found out everything that was happening in camp, found out that he got dropped or hit to the body or something, found out everything that was supposed to be kept private, and so he kind of Garcia started to believe that his team were kind of against him. You know, Goosen didn't really care because he allowed the security of the camp to be infiltrated, and then also Oscar De La Hoya not believing him, not turning up, and all this stuff. And I think he just got over emotional about this, started to believe that people were against him. But I actually think he's wrong about this, you know. And the more he believed this, the more he, you know, started acting up and not believing in his promotional team. And Oscar De La Hoya after that just started to see him as kind of a bit of a sport child. But he wouldn't say it because Oscar De La Hoya is a kind of character that doesn't really want to say things openly. He wants to kind of smooth the waters and not say maybe what he really thinks. Whereas Bernard Hopkins, total opposite, he's going to say what he thinks. And that's where the big riff came from. Bernard Hopkins saying a few things about him, that he's a bit of a sport child and he's immature and boxing's going to find him out. And obviously Garcia reacting to that. This is where I feel most of the misunderstanding came from. Is he right in saying this? I don't think he is. I do like Garcia, but I think, you know, young, immature, making some mistakes. I don't think he's correct about some of the things he said. Having said that, he wouldn't be the first person to be disappointed with the promotional job that Oscar De La Hoya does. You know, Canelo wasn't happy with Oscar De La Hoya. There's a lot of detractors that say that, you know, they're not happy with Golden Boy the way Golden Boy do their promotions and the way things work. They just care about money and they don't care about the fighters and things like that. Obviously, we know Floyd Mayweather had a lot to say about Oscar De La Hoya as a character and certain things. So, I don't know. But from how I see it, I don't think it was intentional at all that Oscar De La Hoya, and it's not in his interest for Oscar De La Hoya to want to see Garcia beaten. So I think Garcia was wrong about that. Now, let's get on to the actual fight with Oscar Duarte. It was a good fight. A lot of people thought it was a lackluster fight and it was a bad performance stuff. I thought it was a good fight. I thought Garcia did really well. And I'll tell you why. He'd just been beaten prior to this by Gervonta Davis in an embarrassing loss where he told everyone he was going to win. He had a rib injury. He's having these problems with his promotional team. All these things were on his mind. If he lost this fight, his career would probably be over. He can't come in all guns blazing. Most people, when they got their back against the wall, you see a boring fight because they're just trying to get the win. You see people like Anthony Joshua in boring fights when he had a loss and he didn't want to take any chances. We saw Shakur Stevenson against a power puncher, and he didn't want to take any chances. So I'm not surprised that Ryan Garcia was a little bit tentative, moving around, trying to be safe, hitting with a jab, not really committing that much. But I found that he warmed up really quickly. He was always throwing hard shots, meaningful shots. He was fighting on a back foot because he had a tough opponent who was a hard puncher. He had to be careful. But he didn't. I think he got the balance between the defense and the offense perfectly. He wasn't like Shakur Stevenson, like I said, too scared to even throw a punch. His defense was good, Shakur Stevenson. He didn't get touched, but he also didn't do anything. He didn't take any chances whatsoever. Garcia wasn't like that. Garcia was on the back foot. He was being careful and defending himself relatively well, moving around the ring, but he was active. Like I said, he was throwing the jab, controlling the distance with the jab, and he was bringing the right hand into play, throwing it with some authority as well. He was following it up with combinations every now and then. Duarte was just following him around because he couldn't kind of get him to stay still, and that's what a lot of power punchers need you to kind of stay still to land their punches. And he had some success. Duarte made it. He's a tough guy. He's gonna have some success, but in the end, I think Garcia did really well. And then the icing on the cake to actually end the fight in the 8th round, I give him like a 7 out of 10 for a performance. And I've heard a lot of people saying his performance was really bad. I wouldn't say that. First fight back, I think that's the kind of performance that you would expect, to be honest. So yeah, I like the performance. Unlike a lot of people I've been hearing, I think he's still a contender to be one of these great guys that can compete with the likes of Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Teofimo, these young up-and-coming guys that are doing big things, becoming world champions and stuff. I think Garcia has the potential to do it. Mentally, I don't know. I'm not sure. That emotional side that he has to be something that he either grows out of, that kind of immaturity. I think he needs to grow out of that to progress, because the likes of Devin Haney, not so much Shakur Stevenson. I have a feeling that he's got quite an immature mind as well, but I think Devin Haney and Gervonta Davis are a little bit more mature in their thinking. But nevertheless, I do think he's still a prospect. I don't think his career is over, and I think it was a good win. Now, the negative sides, the things he didn't do right. I only gave him a 7 out of 10 for performance for many reasons. You can see working with Derek James. Oh, and that's another thing I forgot to say, a new trainer. All those things put together, you're not going to come out all guns blazing against a tough guy like Duarte. You're going to take your time and be tentative, which is what we saw. His weaknesses. He has some weaknesses. You can see that he's been working on some things with Derek James, the footwork, being a bit tighter defense. I think Derek James definitely tried to focus on being a bit tighter with his defense, using his footwork. Derek James, definitely you can see the influence of using his footwork to get in and out of range and using that as a defense. He still had an issue of having his head too straight up and pulling straight back in a straight line, which is obviously the major issue that he has to work on. Many people have said it before. It's got him caught out against obviously Gervonta Davis, but even prior to that, he was caught out with this technique, this bad habit against Luke Campbell also, who dropped him, and obviously Gervonta Davis, like I said, who finished him with a body shot. So, you know, he has some weaknesses, and some of those weaknesses still resurfaced in this fight against Duarte. But like I said, I like the fact that he looked like he was working on new things. He was doing this kind of a Philly shell shoulder roll type thing, but it most definitely wasn't refined, and he's going to obviously have to work on that. But I don't know exactly what he's trying to do there. I think he was kind of trying to make himself a smaller target, and trying to maybe protect his the body shots, because that's what's caught him out a few times. Maybe that's why. But he was kind of turning his back completely, and I'm not sure quite what he was doing there. It was a nice idea to make yourself a smaller target, but I don't think it seemed to have a little bit of success early on, because literally Duarte couldn't hit him because he had his back turned. But you know, you're not really allowed to do that. But eventually it backfired when Duarte kind of figured it out and kind of still got some shots in there, and also he got hit on the back of the head a few times when in that position. But I like the fact that he was kind of working on new things, working on some kind of defensive posture, because Garcia we've seen him just be a more of attacking minded person going forward, and his weaknesses are defensive. You know, he uses his athleticism and his reflexes to get out of the way, but he doesn't get his hands up, especially when he's backing out of exchanges. He often doesn't get his hands up, and sometimes he gets his hands up at the last minute because he's kind of his reflexes again. You know, he's using his quick reflexes to get his hands up at the last minute, and I would like to see him a lot tighter when it comes to getting the hands up. I think he definitely needs to be more disciplined in that regard. He tends to use his footwork as offense, and it's not going to work against certain fighters. It's going to work better against certain fighters, and he's going to get caught out. You know, he basically, what I'm trying to say is, he still seems defensively vulnerable. He seems more vulnerable than his rivals, his main rivals. Devin Haney looks more defensively sound. Shakur Stevenson looks more defensively sound. Gervonta Davis, even though he's an attack-minded kind of fighter, he still looks more defensively sound. You know, so even Teofimo, I would say Teofimo even looks more defensively sound than Garcia. But going forward, you know, I think he's right up there. Going forward, throwing shots, you know, his reflexes, his timing is really good. That left hand, he relies on it a lot. And he's got power in the right hand as well, but it's normally the left hook. But, you know, going forward, he's as good as any of those guys. His problem is defensive, and I think he needs to work on that a lot more, you know, establishing distance, you know, the lead leg, get that strong lead leg just to negate the difference. Don't always use your footwork, because you just invite a lot of pressure. Just backing off all the time. I think if you watch Mayweather often kind of establishes that lead leg as a barrier, and he uses that in combination with a jab, like a good rangefinder, to negate the distance. And I think Garcia needs to do that a little bit so that he doesn't have to move too much. You judge the distance with your footwork first, you know, and I would like to see Garcia doing a little bit more of that, you know, establish that distance with the lead leg, and then, you know, reinforce that with the jab to measure distance. And he did do that. He was measuring the distance well with the jab, pouring with the jab to measure the distance and to keep Duarte off him. But he could have, you know, used a little bit more footwork to kind of establish that distance more, so he wouldn't have to move so much. But overall, I think it was a good performance. I think he's still in there as one of the top prospects. He's still young, so he can still just focus on what he needs to do. Get rid of the whole emotional thing with his promotional team and stuff. Just focus with Derrick James, working on that footwork, establishing that distance, being a little bit defensively more responsible, not just relying on your reflexes, because when you rely on your reflexes, a lot of these shots were really close. He was just getting away by inches, but it shouldn't look like that, because you're going to get caught by someone who's slicker, who's faster than Duarte. Duarte wasn't the fastest puncher, although he was a hard hitter. It was easy to see his punches, and Duarte was still catching him. So imagine he's in there with an elite puncher, even someone like the guy who fought Shakur Stevenson. That guy was better than this guy. So I wouldn't like to make any comparisons. I think he did well. I'd like to see him improve on some of those defensive mistakes in the next fight. Who do you think he should fight next? What did you think of his performance? I've got a feeling a lot of people are going to disagree with me, because a lot of people said that they didn't really like his performance against Duarte, and they thought it was a bit lackluster. I thought it was quite a good performance. Let me know why you didn't like it. If you did like it, how do you think he does against a Shakur Stevenson, a Devin Haney, a Teofimo, a Lomachenko? So many fights out there. How do you think he would do? Obviously Lomachenko's at lower weight, but it could still happen. But do you think he's got a chance against the top guys? Do you think he's got a chance in a rematch against Gervonta Davis? I want to hear your thoughts, guys. Let me know in the comment section. I'm on to the next one.
I said, guess who's back? Man, guess who's back? I said, guess who's back?